So, I wrote something earlier today. It was a small thing, just in regards to my Cambodian identity, and I guess a little bit of my Chinese identity too. Something that I didn't understand until into my 20s, and I think a lot of people that have a multiracial background do go through this, and we're trying to understand what we are as our background, but also in the countries that we are often, born and raised in. And now, obviously, everyone goes through a different issue, and it does come to, how you identify yourself. But at the same time, a lot of us do grow up with that question of, like, am I this? Am I that? What am I? And I think that I wanted to share my experience as a Chinese-Cambodian-Australian and the questions I had and how I answered them for myself and how I am still answering them at the same time that, it does depend on the context of where you're born and ultimately what your background is, because everyone has a different culture and there's always a different element that is raised into it. So basically this is for anyone that is, I guess, Chinese Cambodian background, but this, I guess, can be a time be for anyone. So what's the story? Ethnically, I am assumed to be Han Chinese. My family are Teochew, and I assume that we are Teochew through and through, because we do speak Teochew. Of course, I'm not 100% sure of that, and I would love to actually find out the real answer to that, but it would be wonderful to know the real truth of that. But I'm Teochew. My family, I should say, actually moved to Cambodia, I'd probably say about 100 years ago, and we've seeded into the Cambodian culture as such, and I grew up on all the Cambodian food, all the Cambodian music. I grew up with the Cambodian language all around me. Just the whole culture was basically flowing through my upbringing, and elements of my Chinese culture did come through too, but for the most part it was a lot of Cambodian culture. I'm Australian born. I'm born in Melbourne and a very coffee loving. I've had my hipster phase, so had that experience, and now I'm currently living in Osaka with plans to move to Tokyo next year. I'm also a dancer, which is something I treasure. It's my passion as well, and I really want to become professional about it. And I am very opinionated, as many of my friends do know. So, I think one thing that always confused me and what brought up in the initial place was that I grew up being told that, my family would always say we are Cambodian, and yet they were speaking to me in Teochew, and I didn't until I was about 16 years old that I realized that I was speaking a whole different language the whole time. And even though my parents would speak Cambodian to each other, I didn't really pick up on that. I don't know why I didn't pick up on that. I was a very lost and odd kid, and I think so many people are, and that I was in my own world. And I think many children, we're in our own world that we tend to not focus out, and I think that I was so focused out from my parents speaking a language that it didn't hit me. And I grew up wanting, I guess, a lot of other ethnic kids just to be white, and I knew because from a day one, my kindergarten education, straight up, it was just sandwiches. My mum knew I wasn't a big fan of Cambodian food from a young age. It wasn't until I was older that I loved it, but it kind of forced my mother to know that both her sons were Australian children, and that we were losing that attachment to Cambodia. And it wasn't until later on in life that she started to realize that, it's a part of growing up as being the first generation in a Western country that there'll be many clashes in terms of your identity. And so I ended up having sandwiches for my lunch. I would get food from the tuck shop, the canteen, and I would basically always crave for McDonald's and always ask my mum whether I could have a McDonald's, which is something that still hasn't really changed. As I said, it wasn't until I was 16 that, I finally realized what languages I was speaking, and part of that reason was because I went to Cambodia for my family with my aunt and my aunt and my mother, and I absolutely hated it. I hated the poverty. I hated the stark contrast to my Australian lifestyle, and the lack of McDonald's also, which is still apparent to this day. Yet, a couple years later, my dad decided to go as well, and it was his first time visiting Cambodia after leaving it after the Khmer Rouge. And for some reason, I wanted to join, and I don't know why I did, but I did, and so did my brother. And this time we also went to Vietnam, so we could actually do very touristy things. And I think this gave us a good opportunity to actually like enjoy traveling. And despite it being in such, I guess, a developing nation, it at the same time it made me realize that there was still a lot of joy to be had, and there was something that it may have unlocked this wanderlust in me, and at the same time, the idea that, you know, yeah, maybe there's a lot of money, but at the same time, there is something else bigger than that to be discovered. So, eventually I went back, and eventually I actually went back by myself a couple times, that I was able to finally teach myself some Cambodian to a point where I can speak basic, well, conversational Cambodian, enough to understand the many Cambodian videos on YouTube. Example, Hello Chile. So, it really allowed me to understand a little bit more. And which brings me to my next point. So, what does being Chinese, Cambodian, Australian mean? Now, I said before, you know, ultimately everyone chooses their own identity in that sense. You know, based on your upbringing. I had that Australian understanding of right and wrong and brashness, but to me, my soul is very Cambodian. At the same time, my Chinese background, you know, I am still trying to figure out what that means to me. I see how it trickles into my life. For example, Chinese New Year, and I get to have that ang bao, the red letters, and get that money. Something I would cherish. But maybe not until I touch down in Guangzhou and I can, you know, see Cao Zhou, and I can see my own background people, and then I can actually understand what it means to me, because honestly I am still trying to understand it, and it's something that I really haven't understood, and I don't think that we're so disconnected from it now that even my own parents, there's a conflict about what does being Chinese mean. Now, as a Cambodian, I think we have to recognize that, you know, our people are survivors. We've gone to hell and back, and it's insane what we have gone through. But at the same time, it's important to recognize the past, but not use it as an excuse, but rather use it as an aid and to remind us where we should be putting our futures. And that's something that's really difficult because, you know, we have a lot of corruption in the country, and there's still a lot of bullshit going on, and it's gonna take a while for us to move past that. But we are moving past, and I can see amazing development. I can see the joy and happiness every time I go to Cambodia, and it brings me so much life to see our people just being better, and just the smile on our faces despite our situation. And that, I see, is real hope. As I said before, there is still a lot of issues, and, you know, around 90% of Cambodians, I need to get that fact checked, but I know it's around that amount. But around 90% of Cambodians suffer post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's something that is seen even in generations after the war, and this is generations that living outside of Cambodia. And it's extremely confronting to realize that. And I think that when I learned that fact, I could see the sprinkle of that affecting my own family, and how there was that difficulty of communicating. And I can see it even my just being in Cambodia, and I know that there was a specific period, there was less than 10 psychologists in Cambodia, where it makes it so difficult to talk about those problems, especially in a culture where you save face and you don't really talk about that. It's a battle for us to face, but it will be overcome. And I think that it comes down to us and how we as Cambodians want to overcome these issues, because ultimately we understand our culture the best, and ultimately it's up for us to to really figure out and find our own self-actualization. But at the same time, we have so many things to be proud of. We have a deep, deep and beautiful musical culture, art culture. I still remember growing up to the lullaby my parents used to always sing to me, how you roll our R's, the karaoke, and just listening to like Roses Rotia, since it's a mood, and just the beauty of the music. It was just something just colorful and really beautiful. And like now they get older, like I absolutely love and I absolutely miss eating grung and barhok, because it's so good, especially tuk barhok, because that is the fucking shit. People don't know what they're missing out on. They need to know that shit. That's the shit. So we have so many things to be proud of, but it's a balance, and we got to figure out how we can, I guess, raise that balance from here to up here. And that's something for every culture as well. And how can we, using from our identities, go up instead of going down? Actually, that brings me to my next point, because many Chinese people who are Cambodians as well, like especially living in Cambodia, like a lot of us are probably not really speaking Chinese anymore, because like to us we identify as Cambodian. Again, I identify myself as Cambodian too, but at the same time there's that niggling sense that yeah, you're Chinese there too. And that's a question that is, I think, constantly evolving, and how we identify ourselves 1 year ago to future, it's ever changing. And I really do want to be able to know more about this and know more about my Cambodian background, and I would love to just become more fluent as well in both languages, so that I can have that dialogue and go to Cambodia and find out for myself more and more, because it's an expiring thing. And I think that many of us Cambos, we're still in that phase of what does being Cambodian mean, because for a lot of us, we're still figuring out whether we're living in America, France, Australia, New Zealand, wherever we're living, we are still trying to figure out what that is. And we're getting there, and it's so it's a wholesome feeling, but that's something that we still have to break through more and more. It's funny because people always tell me, like, I'm very opinionated, very aggressive in that same way. And I think they must think like, James, why are you so angry all the time? But that's the thing. I don't actually feel anger. Yes, I do get angry about the injustices in the world and the bullshit that is in existence. But I think I'm going to be more angry if I just lay down and say a thing. I do feel alive from voicing this, and because it's my passion. This is one of my passions, and being able to talk about this passion is really uplifting to me, and I feel alive doing this. There are many things I talked about, but I want to hear what you think. So, whatever background you are, especially if you are Cambodian, especially if you are Chinese background, the Jew background like me, I want to hear what your experience was, because we've all got different stories to tell, and I think it's important that we do share it. So, give a shout. Let me know what you think.